Thank you all for coming. I know it's late in the day, and I'm sure you've all been working, studying, doing your other things. Coming this evening to hear this seminar, it's a great honor to be here. And thank you to Danny and the rest of the team for inviting me back to Hong Kong. It's always a pleasure to be here. I love coming back to Hong Kong, and I'm very happy to be here again today. So when we were discussing about what kind of symposium we should do today, we had a bit of discussion, and it's clear that there's going to be a wide range of people in the audience today. So some of you may have not done corpus linguistics at all before. Some of you obviously have, and you're already maybe a student in a PhD program using corpus methods. And people may be professors in corpus linguistics also coming today. So I tried to design this seminar to help everybody stay on the same page as we go through. I'm going to start with the basic just definition of what corpus linguistics is and try and explain why, if you don't do corpus linguistics, you should, because I think it's a very, very important methodology that all linguists, and particularly applied linguists, should get involved with, but also people in other fields like economics and law and so on. So I'll introduce what corpus linguistics is, and then give you some examples to show you how it actually works. So I'm going to have some live demos of software here, which is always risky, especially because we're being videoed, but let's hope that works. And then I'm going to raise an issue which I think many people have not considered to date, and that's how do we use corpus methods when we are analyzing top-down, when we're looking at texts, discourse structure, move analyses, and things like that. Traditionally, it hasn't been much of a focus in corpus work, and I want to explain first why it hasn't, the challenges of using corpus methods with a top-down approach, and then some very old, and then some current, and some future methods that are going to maybe address these challenges. Okay, so quite a lot in this hour, I hope, and I should get my timer going as well. As I said to a few of you before the start, you don't need to take photographs of the slides. If you would like the slides, I'm very happy to give you them. Just email me at anthony@waseda.jp. Say you came to the lecture, you would like the slides. Just a short email is fine, and I'll reply with the slides for you. So let's get started. So as I just said, it's basically composed of three parts. First, the core concepts in corpus linguistics, defining corpus linguistics. How do we design corpora, and what are the tools and methods that we traditionally use in corpus linguistics? Things that probably some of you already know about. Then I'm going to talk about this topic of top-down analyses of text, the challenges in terms of corpus data, corpus tools, and corpus methods, and then look at these past, present, and future solutions. And I hope there's something new for everybody here. Okay, so let's get started and look at the core concepts of corpus linguistics. So what is corpus linguistics? Well, I'm going to start with what is a corpus, because that's a strange name anyway. So corpus, well, according to Collins English Dictionary, is a large collection of written or spoken texts that is used for language research. Now, already the word text is used in a special way here. A spoken text is just spoken language, often transcribed in some way so that we can analyze it with computers. Written text is just text. Okay. It's a very simple definition, but it actually captures a lot of what people these days consider to be corpora. Just basically a lot of text, a lot of language in an electronic form that we can use for research. So a corpus is a large body of language. So what is corpus linguistics? And here I'm going to call on Biber, Conrad, and Reppen's very famous book on corpus linguistics to define what this methodology is. I am calling it a methodology, if you'll notice. Corpus linguistics is a methodology, an approach, a set of tools and methods. So it's an empirical or an experimental approach. So target texts, whether they're written or spoken, are analyzed to identify actual patterns of language use. So it's like scientific analysis of language. Okay. So we have the word actual patterns, so real patterns in real language. So that's the start. And it uses a corpus, which I've just defined, of natural text, meaning real text, things that are actually in the world rather than coming out of our mind. We don't introspect and just produce what we think language is. We actually look at real language. as the basis for analysis. And here they define corpus a little bit more precisely and say it's a representative sample of target language stored as an electronic database. So this body of language is supposed to be representing something, a larger population in many cases. And by looking at this body of language, then we can understand how that body of language works, if you can get that idea. Okay, and the plural of corpus is corpora. So we often talk about like learner corpora or written corpora and so on. Okay, and it relies on corpus software for the analysis. Why? Because a lot of these corpora are big, a lot of data, so we can't just look at it. It takes too long to look at the text and try and find the patterns ourselves, so we use corpus software for the analysis. So results from the software are generated automatically often, but they do involve interactive techniques. So we produce the results, and then we're supposed to look at the results and kind of find meaning in those results. That's often a critique of corpus linguists, that they produce the results and then just put those results in a paper and don't really talk about what they mean. So we do need to interact with the software and interact with the results and kind of understand what's going on. So this method depends on both quantitative and qualitative analytical techniques. So some people, again, if you've come today and you don't really know much about corpus linguistics, but you've heard it's all like computers and it's just all number crunching. Well, no, there is some of that. It is a quantitative approach. We are analyzing text with software, but we have a qualitative a part of the analysis where we look at the results and we think about what they mean, and then we interpret the results and make some of our own conclusions based on what we've seen. So observations are counted, yes, by the software, but results are interpreted by humans, by us. And if we're not part of that, there's something seriously going wrong. Okay, so that's what corpus linguistics is, and some of you say, yeah, we know that. Okay, so where is corpus linguistics used? I'm going to talk about 3 places, I would say here. Corpus linguistics kind of started out in the world of lexicography, although you can trace it back in different directions, but some of the most impactful work came in lexicography, developing dictionaries. So understanding what words do we use, how do we use them, and how frequent are they used. So we can build a very useful dictionary because we have all the words and how they're used in their different senses. And also we can say how commonly they're used, so students don't have to learn 50,000 words, they can just focus on the important words or the commonly used words. So these are all well-known dictionaries. I'm sure you've heard of many of these. COBIL was developed out of the COBIL corpus that was developed at Birmingham University back in the 70s. And then we've got the Longman Dictionary, Cambridge, Oxford, Macmillan. They're all of these dictionaries are based on corpora, basically real language, and they've analyzed that language and produced these dictionaries based on that work. So that's kind of where corpus linguistics got its name from, but we can go further. A lot of work is involved with looking at written language. And here's an example. This is the Journal of English for Specific Purposes, where people are interested in how do we use English for a specific purpose, like writing research papers, tourism, hospitality, law, economics, wherever, all kinds of different fields. And if you go to their website just like today or yesterday, and look at the recent articles in 2019 in this journal. This is this journal, and the first one is DIY Corpora for Accounting and Finance Vocabulary Learning. So DIY is do-it-yourself, building your own corpora, language databases, to understand the vocabulary of accounting and finance. Classic example of ESP, but it's also a classic example of using corpus methods to understand how we use language. Second one was interesting too. Long-term workplace communication needs. How do people communicate in the workplace, in business workplaces, business professionals, and interestingly, stories from Hong Kong. So this is local research. Chang did this work. Very interesting application. And again, using language data to be able to do this. And then see figure 1, visual moves in discrete mathematics research articles. So they're doing discourse analysis, but they're using a corpus of research articles to do the analysis. I'm going to come back to this problem though of how do we analyze the structure, the organization, using a corpus methodology. And I haven't seen that paper yet, so I can't say how they did it, but I should know, and I will read that soon. It's just out. It's just out. Okay, so another area is kind of the broader world of applied linguistics. You can see here in applied linguistics a title, Sketching Muslims, a corpus-driven analysis of representations around the world of Muslim in British press. So how does the press represent people, Muslims? Do they portray them as, members of society, terrorists, great people, bad people, who, what? So we can analyze the language of newspapers and find out how people are being introduced to Muslims. And it's kind of very powerful. If you think of the political implications of this, it's really important. And the people who do this work, Paul Baker and his colleagues, Kostas Gabrielas and Tony McHenry, they've been to Parliament in Britain to explain some of these results. Okay, we have the discourse of news values here. And I hope if you've followed the news around the world, you'll realize that the language of the news is really important. How do people use language to communicate news and understand news? We have here corpus stylistics and Dickens fiction. So it's being spread beyond just applied linguistics, but into novel writing or literature, classical literature studies. And then we have here a path forward for law and corpus linguistics. So law is all about language, interpreting legal texts and making cases. It's all language. So corpus linguistics is coming rapidly into the legal field, especially in the US right now. And then the last one, maybe the most interesting here, the Mail Online. The software can hunt down terrorists and trolls. System can devour millions of social media messages to identify abusers, terrorists and trolls. So corpus methods to find online bullying and trolls and all terrorists online sending messages to each other and so on. Interestingly, that article is about my own software. So, but I wouldn't portray it in the same way that they did, if you know this newspaper. Okay, but the important point here is that corpus methods, or the corpus linguistics method, can be applied in a whole range of areas anywhere that language is being used, which is pretty much everywhere. Okay, so I want to just keep going with the core concepts a little bit and talk about design. So how do we build a corpus? And the traditional approach is bigger is better. So we get a bunch of text and we analyze it. So back in the 1960s and 70s, we have the Brown corpus, a general English body of language, 1 million words. That was in America, and then LOB was the British version of this American corpus. In the 80s, we had the Coe-Bill corpus, which was led to the Coe-Bill dictionary. That's 18 million words. Then in the 1990s, we had the British National Corpus, again, a body of general language. And that was 100 million words. The more language we have, the more words we can find, and the more patterns we can see. And then in the 2000s, we have the Bank of English. That's also Birmingham, 650 million words. And then we have all these publishers creating their own dictionary databases, corpora. So Cambridge and Oxford, 1.6 billion, 2.5 billion. And then Google now, basically the web as a corpus. And that's 1 trillion words. So you can see bigger is better. Is it better? That's an interesting question that we should really think about, because it's definitely bigger, so we can see more words and see more patterns. But there is an interesting view of the corpus design. As we go from Brown, which is 1 million, to the Oxford, which is almost 2.5 billion words, we move from a kind of carefully constructed representative sample of language to just what you can get. So we start here with the Brown corpus, and then we have the British National, the Oxford English corpus. What's in there? It's not so clear sometimes. Then we go to Globe, which is a web-based corpus, and then Google at the top. If you use Google as a body of language, what language are you representing? What is that language? Well, web pages and some newspapers and some books. Is it general English, or is it just Google English or web English? And so we kind of moved from this principal building of data to this opportunistic corpora. There's advantages to both. So I'm not saying that it's bad direction, but it's definitely something that we should be aware of. So we've gone really from these a corpus being this carefully constructed body of language to, well, from language text to just language data. It's just data now, and we can analyze it. So that's an interesting thing to consider about the design, and we'll come back to these issues in a moment when we look at the challenges of analyzing the language in these corpora. Okay, so what about tools and methods? Well, Tribble back in 2012 did a big survey of 891 corpus linguists, or people using corpora in teaching often, and asked them what tools did they use, and you can see here the results. And Corpus BYU, this is an online corpus and an interface, was definitely the most popular, and then AntConc, which is my tool, was second, and together with Wordsmith tools, and then we had Sketch Engine. It dropped down pretty quickly after. So we have online corpora and online corpus tools and offline corpus tools. Let me show you a picture of the online COCA corpus tool. And this kind of shows you all kinds of things. So this is an interface to a general English corpus of American English, corpus of contemporary American English. And you can see that this is the classic quick or keyword in context view with a search word in the middle and then the surrounding words ordered, often alphabetically on the left and right. Oh, so by looking at these views, we can see, well, how often does this word appear? What kind of words does it appear next to or near to? And that becomes the idea of a cluster when they're together. Word like phrasal verbs, for example, would be a cluster. And then from a distance, we have like collocates, which means like word friends. Not always directly next to each other, but maybe a little bit further apart. So this is keyword in context, but we also have an idea of a keyword, which is a little bit different. And a keyword is what words here are unusually frequent compared with some kind of reference. So we often do a keyword analysis of a small corpus against a general corpus of English. So maybe research articles in applied linguistics versus general English. And what keywords appear in these research articles about applied linguistics, and that will give you the keywords of applied linguistics. That's the idea of that. Okay, I think some of you already know this, so I'm just giving you kind of a taster for these different tools and methods. So Sketch Engine is the other the other big online tool that lots of people use, built primarily for lexicography, but it has a wide selection of corpora that you can use. And it also has interesting features like comparing different corpora against each other, and how is a word used in that corpus compared with that corpus. And if you pick two different interesting corpora, you can find interesting differences in usages of words. Okay, so we're using the word text today in a very special way compared with the normal meaning of text. Like spoken text would not normally be understood by anybody, but now we know what it means. And here are the two most popular offline corpus tools. And you can see the images here show the same keyword in context view, where you have the word in the middle sorted with the context around it. But these tools do have other functions, and I will show some of them later. But let's do a quick demo. So why is this corpus methods approach useful? So here in the Open University of Hong Kong, there's a project looking at student writing and comparing their writing in English versus writing in Chinese and seeing what the differences are, and maybe comparing it to native British students or people studying in Britain and how do they write. So what we can do is we can get a database of student writing, load it into this tool, and analyze it. So let's do exactly that now. Okay, so I'm just going to escape this for a moment. That'll go like that. And let's just look at this tool. So this is AntConc, the most popular offline tool. And what we have here, well, we can see this, we have 10 student texts loaded in as a very small corpus. This is actually a pilot for the much bigger one that the university is currently building. And we can look at these essays like this. and see, oh, it's just, is it going, yeah, like this. Okay, just different essays, lots of words, but they're actually individual students' essays. So what we could do with a tool like this is first we can just count them all the words in the corpus as a whole, and we find straight away that the is the most frequent word used by students. It's kind of, okay. And then to and in. But then we have the word students and education and not and Hong. Why would that be there? Hong. Hong Kong, of course, it's a cluster. And if we look at the keyword in context, we can find out how Hong is being used. And of course, if we go back and look at this keyword in context view, we can see Hong is often appearing with Kong, and we get Hong Kong. Hong Kong, complaining, facing problems, marginalized. Okay, interesting words. Okay. So Hong Kong, what is this about? Population, individuals, many people in Hong Kong are complaining about the poor education. Things like that. So that's what the student's writing about, but finding those patterns would be very difficult just by reading the text and trying to understand it. So by using this approach, we can very quickly find out how words are being used, what do students say about students, and we can even plot the positions of this. So plotting is not showing you what words are near the target word, but where are the words appearing. So we can see that this first student is writing students a lot. They are using the word from the beginning of their essay all the way to the end, just repeatedly using that word. And this student used the word twice. Okay, so very different. Okay, so that's the idea of keyword in, this is a plot, but that's the idea of this analysis. What we can also do, then, we can compare this set of words with general English and see how they compare. Which words in these essays are used unusually frequently compared with general English? And we would expect words like students to be unusually frequent in these essays compared with general English. So if we go to this keyword tool, and we click, we don't need to search the word, and we start, it says, no, you need a reference corpus. You need something to compare it to. So let's load in the brown corpus. Oh, actually, no, not the brown corpus. This is Hong Kong, so probably British English. So let's compare it with British English. So a British corpus, just going to load it in right now. So you can see how hopefully easy this tool is to use. So I'm going to load in a British corpus here. This is B06 word list. And this is 1 million words of British English collected by Paul Baker of Lancaster University in 2006. It's kind of matching the brown corpus from the I showed you earlier. So 1 million words of 2006 English. Let's compare it with the students, and now we get our keywords. That's the idea of keywords. So students and education and Hong and Kong and schools and social and system and class, they're all being used a lot by these students in their essays. Kind of interesting, maybe. Why are they using class? Is this class system or is it my class? You can find out. And it's capitalist class, lower middle class, middle class, social class, tutoring class. That's the other one. And we can see these different uses and so on. Do you get the idea of how this is working? I hope you do. And if you haven't seen this before, I hope you realize that's powerful, that we can analyze language so quickly, but not just blindly hitting buttons, but looking at the results and thinking about what they mean and moving on. Okay, so let's go back to the slides here. So I did this analysis before the lecture, of course. I already checked this. So these are the keywords from the Hong Kong presentation, from the Hong Kong corpus, with students in education and Hong Kong being these keywords. But we can compare the keywords here with students in Britain writing essays, and we get these results. So surprisingly different. What's going on here? So this is the British students in Britain writing essays, and here are the results. The keywords. They don't look key. Is and the and this. Why is that key? It's showing you a different style of writing compared with general English. So they're using lots of present tense is, A is B, maybe definitional. Lots of definite articles because that's academic writing style. And we have words like therefore and however, which are not appearing in the Hong Kong students' writing, although it's very small, remember, it's only 10 students right now. But this comparison allows you to identify interesting patterns. Maybe the Hong Kong students are not using academic language as much as they should if they were in Britain, like the word however. And of course, we can then quickly go and load in the corpus and then check out how is however being used, and we can identify the patterns. Okay, so I hope you get that idea. Okay, let's move on then. That was my first little demo. So what's the problem then? Why did I raise some of the challenges in this field? Well, if you think of what I just did, we only looked at words. Isolated in some sense. We looked at the words around words, but we didn't really look at texts. We were just looking at how students as a whole use words like however or the or this and so on. Okay, so we have these challenges to top-down analyses. If we want to look at the structure of text or text as a whole, how do we do that? And what is the problem here? And this is, I hope, new for all those corpus linguists in the room as well. Okay, so what's the problem? So I'm going to now come back and reflect on all the things I've just said. Okay, so remember I was talking about the brown corpus or corpora in general. There's a real problem with how they're designed. So when they created the brown corpus, we're red now, not green, the brown corpus, when the people who designed that corpus collected the text, they just threw all these texts together into a big pile of language. And the corpus is divided into 500 samples of 2,000 words. So that means they got a text, a spoken text or written text, or written in this case, and took 2,000 words from that text and put it into their corpus. So this corpus is comprised of fragments of text. So, of course, you can't look at the text structure because we're not looking at text. We're looking at fragments of text. So word analysis is okay, sentence analysis is okay, but anything beyond that becomes very questionable. B&C was a very well-known corpus built in 1994. What did they do? Well, you can see here, this is the header file and lots of annotated metadata, and we have here sample containing about 6,688 words of miscellanea. It's a chunk of language, and it represents fact sheets and newsletters and things, but it's just a chunk of language comprised together. So the written part of the B&C, 90%, includes extracts from regional and national newspapers. Extracts, not the whole text, not the whole article. So again, we can't do this top-down analysis. Very recently, Robbie Love at Lancaster University, or from Lancaster University, now at Leeds, created the Spoken B&C 2014. A great, very nicely designed corpus. But even here, if we look at what are in these texts, what are in the files, we can see here topics. In one file, we would have meetings, making arrangements for going to local dramatic performance, and discussing, all part of the same text. Okay? Partners have a chat about jet lag and babies. So, of course, it's a conversation, and conversations diverge and change direction and whatever. But is it a single unit that you could look at and see the start and end and the middle? Well, it becomes very questionable. So we have 1,251 conversations, but they're not kind of full text, not complete units of language that a top-down analysis would make any sense of. It would have no meaning to look at these texts from the top down because they're fragments, they're extracts, they're combinations of different things just put together. Okay, so this raises a really big problem for us if we want to do discourse analysis, move analysis, anything top down. When we come to the web and these big web corpora, we have another problem, well, kind of a similar problem. The UWAC web corpus is a text corpus of British English collected from the UK domain. So it's just web pages, whatever they are, however they are constructed. It could be two articles on the same page. It's just put together. It could be just a fragment or somebody's like title of a blog could be on a page, just collecting different things. What does it mean to look at the top down here? Okay. And even now, that was the corpus design problem, but we also have a problem in the corpus tools that we use. I just showed you a very nice example, I hope, of how we can use these tools to do powerful analyses. But when we want to look at the top down, we immediately have more problems. This is COCA looking, this is the Time Magazine corpus in the BYU framework, where the COCA corpus is also housed. And in this tool, we can look at a breakdown of words over time. So we can see like this, a word, Albert Einstein, and when did people talk about Albert Einstein? And we can see very frequent in the 1930s. And then it drops down and it increases again. But wait a moment, what does that even mean to say 1930s? What texts are we talking about? So we have like 1920s and 1930s, and we have the size and the frequencies, but of what? Words where? And it becomes very difficult to know like how many texts are actually in this 1930s. Is it 1? Is it 1,000? Is it 10? We don't know. Is it 1,000 here and 5 here? We don't know. So it becomes a real problem. Sketch engine, same problem again. We have this beautiful breakdown of how words are used, but where is it coming from? It's from this N10-10-12 web corpus. So there's no information here about discourse, structure, and so on. Then my own tool, AntConc. It's a nice tool, I think, but there's no way to search by text and word. We can't look for a word in a particular text. We can only look at a word in the corpus as a whole. We can see which text the words appear in, but we can't search for like, I want this word in this kind of text. We can't do it. So it's the same kind of problem again and again, that corpus design and corpus tools have not really thought about top-down discourse level analysis. And here we have the keyword in context. So, okay, word. So where in the text is that word? If you switch to the plot tool, you could perhaps see it, but most people don't, and they are happy to analyze these words in context of the sentence or the surround, but not before and not after. Okay, and the final nail in the coffin for corpus linguistics, when we look at top-down, is the most classic approach to looking at keywords, which I showed you an example of. How do we calculate keywords? Well, it's the frequency, it's the unusual frequency of the word in one corpus compared with the other. That's the corpus as a whole. We're not thinking of text at all. We're just putting all the text together into one big bucket of words, counting the frequencies here, counting the frequencies there, and if it's higher here, relatively than here, it's key. But it could be key because just one text had the word lots of times. Like the student example I showed you earlier, one student used the word student all the way through their essay, and somebody else didn't use it at all, or just a little. So maybe it's key in that text, but not key in the corpus as a whole, or, well, depending on how you define the corpus. Okay, so I want to give a quote here, because this is Jesse Egbert from in the US, and he's a great researcher, and he says, frequency is overrated. Using text dispersion to measure word importance is kind of what we should be thinking about. Dispersion means how words are spread across text, not just the raw frequencies. And he says, the statistical computation of keyness should capture words that are characteristic of the content of those texts, not the corpus. I'm going to come back to his quote a bit later, but I hope at this point now, I hope at the beginning you thought, oh yeah, corpus linguistics, that's kind of cool. And now I hope you're thinking, oh, actually, there's a big problem with that. So we can now come to some solutions. So how do we deal with this problem of analyzing bottom up? That's okay. Word level, sentence level. Yes, we can do that very easily with the current tools and the current corpora, no problem. top down, we can't do it because of the data, we can't do it because of the tools, and we can't do it because of the methods. They're all word-based. So I am exaggerating a little. There are some ways around, and I'm going to introduce a few now. Okay, so in the past, people have thought about this problem, and one of the classic approaches to dealing with text is this idea of, well, in the vocabulary world, called vocabulary profiling. And it's the idea of how is a word used in text, not in corpora, okay? Very different field. It's actually a vocabulary field development rather than a corpus linguistics field development. But a guy called Paul Nation, maybe the most famous vocabulary researcher in the world, produced a program called Range, and it's designed to look at how words are dispersed across texts. Okay. Now, I've developed a tool with Paul Nation. I've worked closely with him to develop this tool called AntWord Profiler, and this is doing that same thing. We can look at how words are used in and across texts. And if you have not seen this before, the red words are easy words, the top most frequent 1,000 words. The green words are the second most frequent 1,000 words. Blue is the third level, and then black is words which are not commonly used words. Okay, but we can see a single text, and we get a profile of the vocabulary in that text, and we can expand that in lots of different ways and see which words are frequent in lots of texts, not in the corpus, but in lots of texts, and so on. So I don't want to talk much more about this because I want to show some other things. But there is this idea of profiling words in text. Okay. Now, coming back to ANCONC, which I just demonstrated earlier, there is the tool called Plot, where we can search for a word and see where it appears in the text. Surprisingly, I don't think many people use this. I use it in my research a lot, but I think, depending on the field, it's not used as frequently as it perhaps should be or could be. So looking at how a word is used like there versus there is interesting. So what is the difference between these two texts? Why is this student using this word a lot and this student not using the word at all? The word like however. Maybe however is key because one student's using it in every single sentence badly. Who knows? We need to look at this in more detail. Okay, but I do want to come to a kind of different thing now. I'm really interested in texts, not as much corpora. I'm interested in how language is used in real world, actual body, like start to finish texts, complete texts. So I had this idea, well, working with Paul Baker at Lancaster University, we had this idea of, can we identify prototypical texts from a corpus? So we have a big body of language. But which of the texts in that body of language are prototypical of the corpus as a whole? And if we can identify which ones those are, we could actually take them out of the corpus and read them like normal people and see what patterns are in there. And that's a prototypical text. So the patterns we find by reading it should hopefully match the patterns we would find in the corpus as a whole. So normally we can't do top-down analysis because we don't have the tools and there's too many texts. But if we can identify a prototypical example, we could read it and then understand that structure and then apply it to the rest and check other ones to see what would happen. So this is the idea of prototypicality. So having the typical qualities of a particular group or kind of person or thing. That's what prototypical means. The clearest, best, most typical, most representative example. That's the idea. Now, if you're a teacher, and I think many of us are, I hope you can immediately see why this would be great to have. Because you could load in your student essays, and you could say, okay, which one of these essays is prototypical of the whole? And that's hopefully like going to identify what's good and what's maybe not so good in the class. Yeah? What features are lots of people showing in their writing. If you can rank the prototypicality, you could say this is very prototypical and this is atypical. The bottom is the least prototypical, and maybe that's the student with the most problems. So the idea of clearest, best, most typical, most representative can be applied all over the place. We could apply it to newspaper articles and see which newspaper article is the most prototypical of Muslim representation. Things like that. Okay. So how do we do this? So I developed a tool in collaboration with Paul Baker called Protant, which basically does this automatically. So it's free and it's multi-platform, and I'm going to give a quick demo in a moment. It works on you. Just plug it in with the USB stick. And what it does is it ranks text by the number of target words or keywords that they contain. So if a text has lots of keywords from the corpus as a whole, if that text has lots of them, that's going to be defined as prototypical. Now, people will say, but that's not always the case, but we're simplifying the problem. You could think of prototypical grammar aspects or prototypical structural aspects. We're going to still focus on vocabulary, but we're going to look at the text as a whole. Okay, so the software looks like this, and you may think, oh no, that looks really complicated. What's going on here? But it's not so difficult. What we have is our target corpus here. We load in our student essays. Then we load in our reference. Now, our reference could be a corpus, or it could be a list of words that we're interested in that we want to see where do they appear frequently and so on. And then we have some statistics that we can leave as default. These are best practice stats. We hit the start button and it produces these tables. These are the text ranked by the prototypicality. These are all the words which they are all using, the keywords in all the text, and the other keywords themselves. So let me quickly demonstrate this because I think it might reveal how powerful this approach can be. Okay, so I'm going to load in, just a second. So I'm going to start my Protant tool. Now I could use the essays that we just looked at a few moments ago, but I'm not going to because I want to show this example, which is very nice from my own class. Just a second. Okay, so here's the tool that you just saw a screenshot of. I'm going to load in my own students' essays. Okay, so I teach a technical writing class, and just a second here. So I teach a technical writing class for graduate school students, and they all wrote essays. Sorry, not essays, sorry, research papers. And I took the abstracts from those, and I want to see which of the students are writing the abstracts well and which are having problems. So how do I do that? Well, let's compare these with the academic word list. If you've heard of this, this is a word list created by Averil Coxhead back in the 90s. The most commonly used academic words. Things like however, moreover, and other words like that. So I'm going to rank these students' files based on the academic word list. If you haven't heard of the academic word list, it's just 570 academic words. Okay? So here are my students' essays. Here is the academic word list. I'm going to count how many of these words are in each essay and rank them. Done! So the most prototypical essay is number 12 here. Sorry, number 17. That has the most academic words in it. I can click on it and see it. You can't see that, but I'll show you a screenshot in a moment. But I can also see right down at the bottom, this student has not used many of those academic words at all. Okay, so what's the problem with this one? And that's the idea of this top-down, text-level analysis, but still using corpus methods. So what do these essays really look like? So let me just get my screen back up. Okay, so let's look at the most prototypical one. Okay? Now, this is very technical, so don't worry about the language, the technical vocabulary here, but this is using lots of academic vocabulary. The most academic abstract in the collection of students' reports. So I could perhaps show that to the students as a class and show, look, there's lots of examples of academic words here, and then still point out some problems, perhaps. Let's look at the least academic one, this one. Now, if you first look at this, you may not immediately know why it's so low in the ranking. And it is an intriguing text. it doesn't have many academic words, but it has lots of technical vocabulary. The only academic word, it has things like moreover, but not really suggest, but not really a lot of academic words. Let's look at the second least. It's this one. It's got the word however and therefore, but it's clearly different. It's not good academic writing. But I was able to identify this student's text without reading all of them. I could put them into the software, do the prototypical analysis, look at the least prototypical texts. And the first one I thought, that's a bit odd. I need to look at it more. The second one is like, oh, I know why that's low. And that helps me as a teacher to find texts and read them then slowly and identify the issues. So that's the idea of prototypicality. I think it's a cool idea. I think it's really powerful. And the methods, I'm using keywords right now to identify the prototypicality. But if you have other ideas, let me know. Because if we can specify what variable we're going to use to define prototypicality, you could apply this to grammar structures, to text organization, to vocabulary, keywords, whatever. I think it's a really interesting approach. But the most important thing is that we are using texts, not fragments, not extracts. These are real texts. So if we have a corpus with real text, we can start doing things like this. So corpus developers need to be building corpora of text, like complete text. The good news is the rebuilt program here is using real text. They're using student essays, complete essays. So all of this is possible for the projects here, which is excellent. But still, many corpora are built with these fragments as their core element. OK, so we've looked at prototypicality as one of these methods, or one of these tools. I want to just go back to the method problem as well now. So Jesse Edberg was talking about the statistical computation of keyness should be based on dispersion of words across text, not the frequencies in the corpus. And as I expected, he's produced a paper on this and actually produced a new measure of keyness that is based on the number of texts that these words appear in. So he's got an article. It's still in press, so you can't get this yet, but I have it because I'm lucky. Incorporating text dispersion into keyword analyses is coming out very, very soon, like maybe in the next couple of weeks even, perhaps. Okay, in press. And in fact, it might even be online now. If you go to Corpora, this journal, and just have a look, it might be there now. Okay. So this is Jesse and his colleague, Doug Biber, who was the author of the book I showed you earlier, one of the authors of the book. And they've implemented now a new keyness measure, brand new, based on text, the frequency in text, the number of texts that the word appears in. The kind of inverse of frequency, if you think about it. Really, really interesting work. OK, so the good news as well about this is that this method I'm going to apply in my own software, so that if you are interested in using this way of identifying keywords, you can just use ANCONC, because it will have that method built in the next version. So, and the results are very positive for this method. OK, last thing. OK, this is very new. The problem, I talked about initially the design of corpora being based on fragments. If we design corpora based on text, then we can carefully tag the text, add metadata that makes it easy to search for top-down features. So I've recently proposed something called AntDB, Ant Database, and it's a way of organizing a corpus so that we can analyze top-down features. Okay, so this is getting a bit technical now, so just if you're inclined, please have a look at this. So these are the corpus tokens. So the cat sat on the mat, and this is a dummy example, and it just keeps going all the way through. But what we also put inside the corpus is the document ID. This is number one. And the author or contributor or whoever's submitting this, like Anthony. And we also have paragraph markers and sentence markers and so on. Once we start putting that information in, we can then also give some metadata about who's writing these texts, like con ID 1 would be Anna, and then Bob, and then Kath, and they're females and males, and they've given permission for the file to be added or not. We can also metadata tag the corpus text itself. So text ID 1 is a written text, it's from a book, and it's fiction, and just go on and on. We can add lots of metadata to this corpus, and then we do what we call in database management, we add indexes, okay? So we can say, where does the appear in the corpus, and we index the positions here. Position 5, position 14 for the next capital the. 5, 14, and so on. Doc ID appears here, okay? Contribution appears here and here and here. And then the doc IDs, and we have these references. These indexes allow us to very quickly find our text. Find our contributors, find our words, and so on. So this is going to be, I said going to be. I was going to show you a demo today, but because the environment I wasn't sure about, I couldn't run it. But this is what it's going to be added into. This is AntConc version 4, which is going to be released very, very soon. If you've used AntConc before or are interested in using this tool, it looks identical to what you've just seen a moment ago. But behind this interface is that engine, that database structure, so that here, instead of just typing a word, we can type contributor or text, or what I said before, text and word. So which fiction has this word in it? Which gender has this phrase in it? Things like that. So we can say, okay, I want to look for books written by Bob that have this word in it. And then do that search and get the results. Okay. I'll just give you quickly this example here of why this is really useful for the project here at Open University of Hong Kong, but also around the world. So Robbie Love, as I mentioned earlier, developed the Spoken BNC 2014. And this is 11.5 million tokens or words of contemporary spoken British English from 2012 to 2016. And it's available for free now. You can download it. But it's very structured, highly structured, and token level, or word level, subtext, like who is speaking, what are the genders and the dialects, and what are the hesitations and pauses and things like that. What subtext features are there, and what text features are there, like is it what topics are being discussed, or is it informal or formal spoken, and things like that. Okay, so we have things like, at the token level, part of speech, and lemmas, and pauses, and overlaps. At the subtext level, we have speaker demographics, and gender, and age, dialect, and status. And at the text level, the context, and the numbers of speakers, and transcribers, and so on. So because we have that kind of corpus being built, we need to be able to put it into a tool like this and be able to analyze it. And in the next version, I wanted to show a demo today, but I was not sure I could, so I gave up. I should have. If you're interested, I'll be uploading it to my website for download really soon, so you'll be able to play with this. But what it allows us to do then is to do a standard search, like fish and chips, okay, just like a phrase, but then at the subtext level, we can say all filled pauses produced by speakers aged 30 to 39. I don't know why you'd want to do that, but we can type that as the search, and we can get very interesting results from the top-down level. All instances of the lemma give, giving, gives, by female speakers. Now, these are maybe not the best examples, but if you're doing research in anything to do with language, I hope you can see those kinds of patterns and think what you would search and why that would be interesting. For example, a quick example would be Muslim in broadsheet newspaper versus tabloid newspaper, and just search for the two differences. And that would be immediately interesting in terms of representativeness of the representation of Muslim in British newspapers. Yeah. Harry Potter in book 1 versus book 2 versus book 3 versus book 4 versus 5 versus 6 versus 7. And we could search for them separately, but all in one corpus. It's kind of interesting. And at the text level, all instances of init in text produced by a transcriber number 9, if you're interested in transcriptions and so on. So these give you all these kinds of possibilities. So I come to my summary and discussion. There is a discussion here then. So first of a quick summary. So corpus linguistics data, tools and methods have important applications in many fields. And I've given you some examples of that. But traditional corpus designs, tools and methods have de-emphasized the importance of top-down analysis, which is kind of strange because traditionally we were interested in top-down things. I think most linguists are perhaps interested in that organization and structure and word meaning across, at least across sentences and across paragraphs and how it flows through a text. We're not interested in just a word in a big body of language, but corpus methods have forced lots of people into that box, that narrow box. Luckily, a new appreciation of top-down text-level analysis is beginning to emerge. It's not just from my work. You can see it in Robbie Love's creation of the BNC spoken corpus. You can see it in Jesse Edbert's keenness measure. And lots of people are becoming more interested in text now. And if you are, then work with people to develop the tools and methods that you need. So we get the discussion. So how best can we or should we incorporate a top-down perspective in tools design method, in data, tools, and methods design? Maybe, I think it's important, but maybe you don't. So maybe in the Q&A you can answer that question. How can we facilitate data interoperability in this new paradigm? Now, this is really messy. Okay, so my tool can produce some results, but maybe you want to put those into NVivo to do some annotation. How do you get the results out of mine and into that tool? Or maybe you tagged all your data in NVivo, and then you want to search for those features in AntCong. How do you get the text out of that and into this? And that's the idea of data interoperability. Okay? So how can we facilitate that? And I've got another project I'm working with Stefan Evert in Germany on this problem. But again, it's a discussion item. What interesting findings, if any, will this shift in perspective reveal? So a lot of people are doing discourse analysis by hand. What would happen if you could do it mass scale? Would it be producing the same results as always? Or would it produce something different? If you've done any ESP work, you know of Swales's CARS model. Create a research base, the structure of introductions in research papers. Everybody follows it and everybody teaches it, but it's only been based on analysis of a few texts. What happens if 1,000 texts were analyzed in this? What would be the result? So what findings, if any, will this perspective reveal? I think it would be profound, I would expect, but nobody's done it yet. And I will finish there because I'd like to have some of your views on this topic. Thank you.
Thank you very much.